Night fell. Shadows stretched across the desolate moor. Wind howled. A lone figure stumbled through knee-high heather. John shivered, clutching his thin coat. He was lost. The air grew colder. John felt a prickle on the back of his neck. He scanned the darkness. Nothing. He quickened his pace, desperate to find shelter. Each gust of wind seemed to whisper his name. John had been hiking for hours. The forest around him was dense, the trees towering high above, their leaves forming a thick canopy that blocked out most of the sunlight. The air was cool and crisp, filled with the earthy scent of moss and fallen leaves. He had strayed from the marked path, lured by the promise of a scenic vista. The allure of untouched nature and the thrill of adventure had drawn him deeper into the wilderness, away from the safety of the trail. Now he regretted his impulsiveness. The once inviting forest now seemed menacing, the shadows lengthening as the day turned to dusk. Every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs set his nerves on edge. The sun had set hours ago, and the moon was hidden behind a thick blanket of clouds. The darkness was almost absolute, broken only by the occasional glimmer of starlight filtering through the gaps in the clouds. He pulled out his phone. No signal. The realization hit him hard. He was completely cut off from the outside world. The device that had always been his lifeline was now just a useless piece of metal and glass. Panic welled up inside him. His heart raced and his breathing became shallow. He tried to calm himself, but the fear of being lost and alone in the vast wilderness was overwhelming. He was alone, lost in the middle of nowhere. The realization was like a punch to the gut, leaving him feeling vulnerable and exposed. The forest, which had once seemed so full of life, now felt like a cold, indifferent entity. He started to run, his breath forming white clouds in the freezing air. The cold bit at his skin and the branches clawed at his clothes as he pushed through the underbrush. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he had to keep moving, driven by the primal instinct to survive. Then he heard it, a faint whisper carried on the wind. It was so soft, almost imperceptible, like the breath of a ghost. The sound seemed to weave through the night air, mingling with the rustling of the grass and the distant hoot of an owl. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The whisper was elusive, slipping through the fog like a phantom. It was as if the very mist was speaking to him, wrapping him in its cold, damp embrace. He stopped, holding his breath, straining to hear. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing in the silence. The world around him seemed to hold its breath too, waiting, watching. There it was again, a soft, sibilant sound, like someone whispering his name. It was clearer this time, more insistent, as if it was trying to draw him closer, to lure him into the darkness. John spun around, searching for the source of the sound. His eyes darted through the shadows, trying to pierce the gloom. But the night was impenetrable, a black curtain that hid whatever was out there. But there was nothing there, just the empty moor, stretching out into the darkness. The whisper had vanished, leaving only the silence and the cold. Just the endless expanse of the moor, shrouded in darkness. The mist swirled around him, thick and heavy, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. It was as if the moor itself was alive, breathing, whispering. He started to walk again, his heart pounding in his chest. Each step felt like an eternity, the whisper still echoing in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that something was out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for him. The whispering grew louder. It seemed to be coming from the darkness just behind him. John dared not look back, afraid of what he might see. He broke into a run, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. He ran until he could run no more. He collapsed on the ground, gasping for air. He looked around frantically, still nothing, but the whispering continued, closer now, surrounding him. Suddenly, he saw it, a light flickering in the distance. Hope surged through him. He struggled to his feet and stumbled towards the light. As he drew closer, he saw that it was coming from a small cottage nestled in a hollow. Smoke curled from its chimney. John hesitated for a moment. He didn't know who lived there, but he was desperate for help. He approached the cottage and knocked timidly on the door. The door creaked open, revealing a kindly old woman with twinkling eyes. Her smile was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold, dark night outside. The wind howled, and the trees whispered secrets only they knew. "Lost, dearie?" she asked, ushering him inside. Her voice was soft, almost musical, and it put John at ease. He had been wandering for hours, the forest seeming to twist and turn, leading him in circles. The warmth of the house was a welcome change. Relief washed over John. He was safe. The room was dimly lit, but it felt cozy, filled with the scent of baked bread and herbs. The old woman led him to a chair by the fire, where he could finally rest his weary legs. He turned to thank the old woman, but the words died in his throat. His eyes widened in shock as he noticed something he hadn't before. The shadows in the room seemed to move, almost as if they were alive. Standing behind her, shrouded in shadow, was a figure. It was barely visible, but its presence was undeniable. The air grew colder, and John's heart began to race. It was tall and thin, with long, sharp fingers. The figure's elongated features were grotesque, almost otherworldly. It seemed to blend into the darkness, its eyes glowing faintly. And it was whispering his name. John's blood ran cold. He wasn't safe. The whisper was soft, almost a hiss, but it was unmistakable. It sent shivers down his spine, and he felt a chill that went straight to his bones. He had led the whisper straight to her. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. The old woman's eyes widened in fear, and John knew he had to act fast. But what could he do? The figure in the shadow seemed to grow larger, more menacing. He had to protect her, but how?